All right. Thank you very much, Rebecca. We're going to be talking about Microsoft Teams and integrating it with voice today. We'll be going through a few different things. First, we're going to talk about why do you care? Why does this matter? Obviously, it cares for some reason because there's a good number of you here today. Glad to see the great audience. So it is something that's important. But let's review and come up with some reasons why it may be important to you so that we can level set what's going on. Second, we're going to talk about, okay, how can we fix it? How can we actually integrate Teams with voice? And then we're going to look at a recommended option of the way that Vertical, with all of our experience and background, suggests. We'll talk about benefits for this, the reasons why you go this direction and why this is our recommended option. And then we'll finish up with some what you need to knows, some little things that will help make it better, whatever option you decide to choose. And we'll finish off with any questions, discussion, things that you want to talk about. So definitely remember, you can put your questions at any time during the conversation in the chat bubble. It's in the lower left-hand corner. You may not immediately see it until you mouse over the bottom control bar. But as soon as you do, you'll see a little chat icon, and you can add questions in there at any time, and we'll make sure and go through all of those before we get out of here today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here and move on into the meat of the presentation. So why do you care about this topic? I'm sure all of you have reasons that you're here today, but the most obvious reason is that everybody has Office 365. 41.59%, gotta love the detail of that stat, companies worldwide use Office 365. And the number here in the United States is much, much higher. In fact, the majority of Office 365 users in the world are in the United States. And whatever the plan that you have, Teams is now included in virtually every plan. The only ones that aren't there is there's an enterprise and a business plan called Applications Only. And those don't have Teams. But otherwise, every version you can buy now comes included and loaded with Teams. So it's just there. And Teams provides some great functionality. It provides the ability to chat and collaborate, to do Teams meetings. It's usable across multiple different device platforms. And it provides you the ability to have all of that data, those conversations and everything persistent so that you can search it and retrieve and find information later on. It takes a little bit of reliance off of email, and we're all always so overloaded with email. That's always a good thing. There's some deep integration with Office 365. Not surprising since it's bundled with Office 365. Not surprising at all that it is deeply connected to and working with Office 365. And all of this makes it a very remote-friendly platform. And obviously this year, remote-friendly has become all important to people as we've had radical changes in the way people work. And so all of these things come together to be something that more and more businesses are using and adopting. But the problem is that Teams doesn't really have voice capabilities. It's limited out of the box. Yes, you can do some voice calls back and forth with Teams users. You can do a conference as long as everybody's using the computer client and they're willing to have Teams as client or load Microsoft Edge, which is a big ask for a lot of people. But it doesn't really do any of the things that you think of a phone system doing. Teams doesn't receive calls from external people. It doesn't allow you to make calls to anyone's phone number. You can't call somebody's cell phone. You can't text them. You can't use any phone features of transfer, hold, all that kind of stuff. You certainly can't do anything advanced like contact center, auto attendance, or all those capabilities. It's not a phone system in the version that's bundled with everyone. So it does some good things, but it's limited. And the real problem comes from the fact that it's taking up a lot of your communication space now. I'd probably say that 60% of people who are on Teams are using it for almost all of their communications. But the 40% that's left is your voice communications. And that's real time with your customer. Now, it may be that you're saying, oh, voice isn't important to me. Well, that's okay. This may not be the discussion for you. Why don't you join the webinar? We can talk to you about other solutions. But when voice is important, when it is how your customers communicate with you, when it's how they reach out for sales, service, support, key questions, all of those things are important. You really would like to bring this together so that your communications aren't divided. They're in one single package. So how do we fix that divide? How do we put it back together and make this into one piece? Well, the very first thing you know, and if you remember nothing else from this webinar, here's the slide to remember, is that if you're going to do anything like this, every solution I'm going to talk about, regardless of who it comes from, requires this other little thing called the Microsoft 365 phone system license. So in addition to what you're doing, you're going to have to pay $8 more a user per month. I say $8 per user per phone, but that's supposed to be per month. Typo. Sorry about that. But you're going to have to do this. This is always going to be there. No matter the solution, no matter what you choose, the options that we go through here in a moment, this is going to happen. And the fun part about this one, by the way, just to give you a little tip, is that it's really hard to find this. So here is my Microsoft console. And you'd think it would just be a matter of typing in phone system, right? When I do that, phone system doesn't come up. I typed phone system wrong. But even if you type it correctly, it's not going to come up in this console. You're going to see something called common area phone. That's not it. That's a license for a standalone phone without the rest of a Teams user. It also happens to be $8 a month, but don't get fooled. Common area phone is not what you need. So finding this in the first place is going to be hard. This is something Vertical can help you with, and we can give you some advice on how to get through it. But there's not, that I found, a simple search term that you can put in there to find it. You really have to go get the specific SKU, that's the inventory number for this item, and put it in, and that's the only way you're going to easily find it. It's a pain. But you're going to have it. No way around it. No solution out there can do this. And the reason why is what this license does is it exposes the phone user interface. It allows you to have control to be able to call external people to do all those other features. Now, just having this isn't enough. You can't call external people if you add this. This won't do it for you. But it's necessary for every solution we're going to see. Okay, so this is the biggest tip that I can offer for you, because people don't realize that this is there. So let's look at several options. Once you have this license, you now need a way to connect to the outside world and to provide you with the ability to actually make and receive phone calls. This license, once again, doesn't provide that. So option one, you can do what's called direct routing. You can connect it if you have an old legacy phone system. You get the Microsoft phone system license. Everybody's got to have it. Then you get what's called a session border controller, or SBC. This is a piece of hardware. Yeah, there's some software versions of this, but it's still got to run on hardware somewhere. This is a device that's going to connect to your phone system and then connect back to Microsoft and mediate the connections back and forth. Now, you're in this, you're going to continue to pay for your PBX support if you're getting that from Vertical or somebody else. You're going to need to continue to pay for that because your PBX is still going to be there. It's going to do all its PBX-y things. People can still use the phone, all of that. And you keep paying for your phone service. Whatever phone lines, or AT&T or Verizon or Windstream or whoever you have, or if you have Vertical for your phone lines coming in, you're still going to pay for those. So those costs continue to be there. So this is one scenario, but it's not one we really recommend. There's a lot of problems here. First, it's generally the most expensive. You got to get the SBC, you continue paying for your trunks, you continue the phone system maintenance, plus the Microsoft phone system charge. You've got a lot there. So there's a bunch going on, and this is probably the most expensive of the lot of the options that we're going to talk about. It's also definitely the most complex. There's lots of individual components that can go wrong, and it's fragile because any of these going wrong will cause the whole system to fail. And it's most limited. You're still going to just be limited to an on-site PBX. You're just going to be able to support Teams users along with it. And one of those pieces to understand is your Teams users are going to be really separated from your PBX feature set in this case. You're going to have people who have the phones, you're going to have people who have Teams, and they're going to be operating very, very differently. So we're really not a big fan of this. There may be circumstances where we think this is right for a customer. We always here at Vertical talk about tailoring solutions to customer-specific needs, but this generally is not our recommended solution. So what's option two? Well, option two is giving it all to Microsoft. We have to buy the phone system license. We've talked about that, but that doesn't get us talking to the outside world. So Microsoft has calling plans. You can buy a domestic calling plan. You can buy an international calling plan. These are going to add $12 or $24 more to the whole project. So you have to get one of these to enable the ability to just use Microsoft. In this case, now you're using Microsoft's PBX features. Your phone system is now gone. It's replaced entirely by Microsoft. And you'll get a bundle of minutes For international, depending upon where you are, you may get a bundle of domestic calling minutes that you would use as well. This has a few problems with it as well. First, there's the potential per minute overages, especially in the domestic plan. A lot of things, international calling and that kind of stuff, we still expect to bill with, but who really expects to be billed for local long distance in the United States anymore? And that's possible here with the Microsoft plan. You've got limited voice features as well. Microsoft does many things very, very well. They are very good, and obviously their decades of history in developing software comes from providing features that customers need. But I can tell you, I've got 17 years of experience with Microsoft's phone solutions, and they've had many of them, and all of them have been terrible over the years. They've all had problems, and they're all not what I considered a fully featured phone system with all the capabilities you need. And so that's all you're going to have. You're going to have those capabilities. There's also problems with service reliability. We'll look at that in just a moment. And something called communications credits, which is one of those interesting things buried in the Microsoft plan to know about. So let's look at a couple of these. Obviously, the per minute overages are an obvious thing. We don't need to spend a lot of time on them. But let's talk about the phone features. So Microsoft has a list of features. Here's the highlights on their page, and it sounds pretty good. They've got auto attendant, and they've got call queues, and they've got recording and conferencing and voicemail. These are the very, very basics. But it's likely missing key features you use every day. Here is Microsoft. This is not something I've done. This is Microsoft's literal list of every single phone feature they offer. It's one page long. Not even two columns. That's one column. That's two columns each for one feature. And there's the link if you want to go check this. This is Microsoft's list. Now, the thing about that is, on any phone product that we at Vertical have sold or anybody else in the industry, this list goes on for pages. There's thousands of features. And the reason I point this out is not because you're sitting there going, I need thousands of features, Kevin. I need tons of stuff. Probably not. But the key point is there's a 10% or maybe 15% of those pages and pages of features that you use every day. And Microsoft probably doesn't have those features. And switching over to it is going to end up you being really frustrated because you're going to go, but I can't, but why doesn't it? Because this is not where Microsoft has ever had strength. Now, this is an okay list for somebody who's looking for just basic phone features. And if calling and talking to your customers, having them call you, all of that isn't a key part of your business, as I said before, this may work fine. But for most users, for most companies, this is going to be totally inadequate, and it's going to be very, very frustrating. The other problem with Microsoft is the service reliability. They've recently had some Office 365 outages, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what they promise. So their service level that they target for Office 365, including voice, is 99.9% uptime. That's 3 nines. Basically, nobody else in the business does that. Everyone's at least targeting 4 nines. That means that they're saying that 43 minutes a month of downtime for your phones is perfectly acceptable to them, and you don't get, any expectation that it's going to be anything different. And the problem is that downtime is measured across all Office apps. So your phones could be completely down, but you could still get to Word and PowerPoint, and that would be counted as completely up because they're measuring it across all of the huge array of Office apps that Microsoft provides. And voice is just a small portion of it. It also, and this one I found really interesting, the primary use case that we see out there for people who adopt Teams is that they're having people use the desktop app, the mobile app. They're really invested in that architecture. They're not really about phones. But if you're going to have this even limited target for Microsoft, it's only about Teams IP phones, Teams certified IP phones that are on wired connections. It doesn't cover any calls to and from the mobile or desktop app. And it only covers problems caused by networks managed by Microsoft. So if your last mile connection goes out, that is no way anything that they even think about. They don't consider it. It's not theirs. Doesn't matter. Don't care. Only their network within, which is really within their data center, right? And their infrastructure. So all this means that Microsoft isn't taking a very high bar at guaranteeing your service. Once again, if voice is a secondary consideration, if you do everything online and that's your business, that could be fine. But if you have customers calling you all day, if you're doing deals on the phone, if you're providing support or providing services, and the phone is part of the key portion of your business, this is completely unacceptable. And by the way, there once again is the link, so you can go dig into this all you want. It's a huge document, but these are the key points to really pull out that they're talking about here. It's not a great process. And they will offer what's called a service level agreement saying, hey, we will deliver and guarantee service. But that service level agreement only starts at 3 nines and then goes down from there. And the problem with this is that not only is that service level agreement not very good and with lots of outs for them, so it's very limited in coverage, but it also only pays out in what's called communications credits, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. Now, SLAs are something that's always contentious. What do they cover? What's not there? But you need them to, at times. If your business is absolutely critical, you need to have this in the contract and you need to have agreement. And when something happens, they need to be something that you're actually going to get the penalty back so that you're getting some kind of compensation and that it hurts the company that's failing on it. We recently had the first one of these that we've ever had to pay out to a customer. And did we do it? Yeah, we paid about $800 to the customer because they had an outage. And we, identified that and returned it to them. But when you have these kind of terms, you're avoiding ever giving anything. And by the way, we paid cash, not communications credits. So what the heck are communications credits? What does that mean? Well, communications credits are things that are used to pay usage on the Microsoft system. You don't pay a phone bill where you say, oh, okay, hey, I used, 1,000 toll-free minutes. I got to pay $20. Here it is. Nope, you pay in communications credits. They're creating their own currency for this, which has some real problems. It covers toll-free, international calls, conferencing minutes, the standard sort of things you see from this kind of thing. That's not the surprise. But the point is, you've got to pre-buy these. You have to buy them ahead of time in blocks and chunks. It's sort of like back in the day when cell phones used to make you buy blocks of minutes. Remember that? That's what this is, except for they don't charge you overages if you go over. They turn off your service. Your calls fail unless you give them a credit card and put in auto recharge mode so that if you run out, you'll keep paying. And the real problem with auto recharge and buying in bulk ahead of time is that these minutes expire. If you don't use them after 12 months, if say you do a big block buy because you want to make sure this is okay, then they'll literally just say, hey, they expire, they're gone, you don't get any benefit out of this. And those are all terrible things. I don't know any business that does business this way. I don't know any finance company that would be happy with this. This is really problematic to me, and one reason why I would not recommend to a customer to go this way. Once again, you can see all the information about this, the links there on the screen. So what do we recommend instead? All right, so you don't want to hook up to our old phone system. You don't want to use Microsoft. What do you want to do? Well, what works really well is hooking a cloud PBX. I used 8x8 as an example because we work with them on a regular basis, but this is not the only product that does this well. You hook this directly into Microsoft. So you don't have to worry about an SBC. You don't have to worry about complex setup, and you don't have to worry about your last mile connection be a point of failure, the SBC, your phone system, all that kind of stuff. It's just two cloud services connecting together. And then all you have to do is get the Microsoft phone system license. Got to get that no matter what. You got to have a cloud seat, for example, an 8x8 seat, and then you've got to configure it, which Vertical can do for you. There is going to be configuration on this, no matter what. Don't let anyone say, oh, you just click a button and it turns on. That's not going to happen on any platform. There's going to be a little more work than that. So this is what we recommend because it's easy and seamless. And if you're using a cloud service like Microsoft Teams, it makes sense to marry it up with a cloud service for your phones and your voice and communications. Now, are there problems with this? Yeah, the two things that we see are how seamless is the integration between the two? Because this is a really good, nice, clean one, but that's not the way everyone's doing it. And do they add complexity to the mix? So first, let's look at seamless integration. A couple of key things here. The integration should use the Teams user interface. It should be available on all the Teams apps. They shouldn't be telling you, and we've seen this, oh, no, you can only use it in the browser interface, which, by the way, with Teams is Microsoft Edge. You can only use it there. You can't use it on the other ones. We'll talk why they're doing that in just a moment. There shouldn't be any user configuration or setup. The user should be completely unaware that this is going on. It should just work. And so let me give you an example of what this looks like when it's done well. Here's my team setup, okay? I've just got a couple of users set up here. It's very simple. I can make a call out just by using the Teams interface. Ironically, that's a call in, but not what I'm dealing with right now. So I can do a call out just from this interface, and it just works. Let me call my desktop phone here very easily. All right, so I've called, I've answered, and now we can see that I'm in the Teams app. It's not really that exciting. It's very video oriented, though I don't have video on, but I can go do things like hold, transfer, console transfer. I can mute. You know, all those features work within the Teams interface. So I can send this call off to somebody else and say transfer it, put in an extension. Send me off to another phone, right? So all of that through the Teams interface. I didn't have to do anything special. I didn't have to use any special commands. I, as an end user, didn't know anything except for what's right there on the screen with the Teams interface. I dialed an extension that was not a Teams extension there. That's something that is not obvious, but I was dialing a non-Teams extension. I was calling somebody who was not on Teams phone. I can call any external number, internal number, and all of this is logged where I can see it. I can see the history of what's going on. It just works. This is not an exciting demo. Why? Because it just is seamless. That the same thing happens on my mobile device. I can use the same mobile app. This is what you should be looking for. And this is what works. That's what you have to look for in this case. If somebody shows you something more complicated, and that's what we're going to talk about next, complexity, you don't want it. You want this. What you want to avoid are these complex options. There are some options I see out there where it's your responsibility to engage. Remember we talked about a session border controller? Well, you need to engage a session border controller and either pay for it or get it as a service. So there's a number of different ways they're delivering it still to connect the cloud service. Don't mess with that. You don't want to have to get involved with that. That shouldn't be your responsibility. The cloud service should be taking care of that. You shouldn't even know about it. They shouldn't be using what are called bots. Bots are little programs that are installed on the Teams side that you can call, and you can use the team command line interface to say, oh, I want to do this. The problem with that is that's a non-natural, not part of the UI way of acting and interacting with the interface for Teams. It's a little better than just using a separate app, but it's not much. You don't want to have to use browser add-ons. Remember I told you a moment ago that some people will say, oh yeah, you can use it, but only in the web browser. That's because they're going to ask each end user to install an add-in into their web browser that drops things on the screen to make this work. Now you've got end users having to deploy stuff, or you have to figure out a way to deploy it to all your end users. It's in the browser. It is a whole other thing to have to maintain and support. And it also limits you to browsers where you can't get the real advantage of Teams. If I can just use this on my mobile device, I can use it on any device. I have Teams installed, and I can use the browser if I want to. And don't use a solution that provides it through a third-party contract. I've got my phone system from here. I've got a cloud solution. I've got Teams. Oh, now I need to get a third solution that I'm paying for and buying. That's just another contract for you. I mean, this isn't killer. There are some places where this makes sense, but it's not the ideal solution. It's not what you really, really want. It can be more problematic if you do it that way. So these are the things you don't want to do. And so you want that ideal solution, one where everything is just seamless, it just works, there's no problems, and you don't have any of these things in red over here. And that's why we recommend this methodology. And we can help you to do that. And there's some real big benefits. There's some good reasons to do this. Let's talk about what you're going to get out of this. First, you're going to get all those phone features. You're going to get all the complexity and things that you don't need most of, but the ones you need, boy, do you need. You've got to have them. You'll get all of that. Some of the things that are common are operator support. If you have a dedicated operator receptionist taking calls, it's not something that Teams supports. Complex routing. If you have, calls going to this ring group and then maybe going over here and moving to different objects throughout the system because you want to make sure you handle customers' calls correctly, that's not possible. If you want to have paging within your building and you want to have people be able to page an emergency, or you have very mobile workers who are in a warehouse space and you want to contact them, that's not possible with Teams. You really need to have this other solution. Faxing. You've got to go to a completely third-party solution if you want to fax with Teams. There's no support for it at all. It's not a concept it's built for. Similarly, low-cost phones. If you want to just have phones, in a break room or something like that, there's no good solution for that. Or you have different devices that still need an analog phone. A classic example is people have door phones, or people have other devices that they've got a voice path that's on an old analog device. You really can't do that with Teams. Teams does have that common area phones license we saw a little bit ago, which is meant to do this. But when you dig in, you find out to do that, you got to do a Teams certified phone. And Teams phones are expensive. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but they are. And then finally, SMS. This should be a cutting edge, hey, next generation technology kind of thing that Teams should be all over. But for some reason, it's still not in the product. And so if you want SMS texting built into your phone solution, which you really should want, because that's the way so many of us are communicating. Let's be honest. Think about it. How often do you text versus make phone calls nowadays in your personal life? Why isn't that true in your business life? Well, but if you don't have texting, then you don't do it. So definitely something to look like. The next piece is deep reporting. Microsoft has some very basic reports, but it doesn't really give you depth. You can get from good cloud solutions 100, 200 different reports that really allow you to see, when are people calling in? How are your people handling them? Are there abandoned calls that aren't being handled? Are there calls that aren't being returned? Are you getting calls outside your business hours that you don't know about? Are your calls being transferred all over the place? When you talk about dealing with customers today, the phrase people love to talk about is the customer experience and how good or bad is the customer experience. Having good data is key to making sure that you've optimized how you're handling those customer calls for the best possible customer experience. Microsoft just doesn't have those reports, but with a good phone solution, you can absolutely get this data, have it, and it will do it for both the team side as well as the phones that are on the other solution. And then there's Contact Center. So Contact Center is on this Microsoft list of features, but let's look at that for a moment. It says Contact Center integration. Connect to your favorite contact center software, because they don't have it. There's no contact center in. There is a built-in call queue. That's a ring group, or what we sometimes call a basic ACD. Don't worry about all the terminology. But they do have something basic here. So if you just need to ring some phones, that's great. But if you have a contact center today, then Teams is not going to do it, unfortunately. And you need a solution that will allow you to integrate with Teams and use that contact center solution. You need both of those. So here's an example of a full contact center solution that's using Teams as the end client, make and receive calls. You can work in both of them. That's no problem. That's what you really want to look for in that solution. And so this is something that Vertical can help you out. We can make sure that you get this kind of solution that solves these problems for you and make sure they work. So what do you really need to know to make Microsoft Teams work with voice? How does this finish up? Well, remember, the first thing is you have to get a Microsoft phone system license. Whatever you do, you're going to have to buy this. And it's going to be a little confusing to find. If you work with us, if we're helping you with this solution, we're going to find this for you and make it easy. But it can be frustrating. I don't say go with us just to find this, but it's one way we're going to make your life easier. The next thing to know about, the next thing to remember, is that the phones have to be Teams certified. You can use the mobile client, the desktop client, you can use the web page in Microsoft Edge to work with this. That's fine. But if you want to use an actual phone on your desk with any of the solutions, you're going to need to use a Teams phone. Here's why. If you try and have a phone ringing on a separate solution, whatever it is, and ringing with your Teams client, the two are not going to be perfectly in sync. There's going to be problems. You're going to discover that maybe you're answered the phone on the team side, and then the phone can still ring, or the phone can still take another call, or other problems along those lines. The two aren't going to sync up. The only one that Microsoft allows to sync up are their Teams certified phones. And here's the problem with that. If you look at those phones, you'll see that they have a Teams-like interface on them. That's great. It's nifty. It looks a lot like how our smartphones work. And that's nice, but that's also expensive because you've got to have a bigger processor, a better screen. It's got to be a touch screen in most cases. It's a more complicated, more expensive phone. And so all of a sudden you can find deploying this to a bunch of people really, really expensive. The good news is you don't have to do this for everybody. You can identify those people who really need to work in Teams and those who don't. With a good cloud solution, you can only provide Teams to the people who absolutely have to have it. And all those who don't, or locations like lobby phones and those warehouse phones and those kind of things, all of those don't have to be on the system. So you only have to pay the expensive Teams phone. You only have to get that common area phone license or get the Teams phone license on your Teams account for the user. You don't have to do all that, only for the people you need it for. And that's one of those things you want to make sure you do. Don't have somebody tell you, oh yeah, hey, you've got 50 users. You got to make Teams for all of them. If they do, it's the wrong solution. Now, another important thing to know about pretty much across the board, Teams calls, if you start making calls from Teams and the Teams client to another Teams user on your system, they never leave Microsoft. They go directly from Microsoft to Microsoft. And the problem with that is that calls for any other number, whether it's a user that's external on the same system or it's an external phone number, it's somebody calling you from the outside, they all go through the cloud system that you're hooking into. And that can be a difficulty for things like logging, call recording, and reporting. The calls on the left there, the Teams to Teams calls, can be non-visible in reporting. And that is a shortcoming to look for and be aware of and know that's going on. The other piece of this is that there is going to be work. This is, like I said earlier, not just flip a switch on. There has to be some work to synchronize accounts. This is something Vertical's going to help you with. We're going to do this for you. But there has to be a method of synchronizing the cloud accounts with Microsoft. For example, once again, I happen to use 8x8 because I got to use a screenshot of some kind. And they have a very nice system where you just hook the two up at the beginning or when you add a user later, and then the software takes care of it. You don't have to think about it. But this is more than just syncing with Active Directory. This is making sure that the phone services are recognized by Teams and that Teams has the route to run itself all the way out. This is where some of the vendors that we've seen all of a sudden start saying, oh, you've got to set up an SBC and you've got to do this, and there's more to pay for. That's where the complexity comes in. You don't want. It should be just this simple. I sync the users up, everything else is taken care of in the background. Now, when I say simple, I don't want to oversell this because it does take some config work. We'll do this at Vertical for you, but a couple of things, you're going to have somebody who is a Microsoft admin and somebody who's an 8x8 admin get together once and set this up and make it work. And then you will be able to just have this run in the background and you won't have to think about it. The same thing should be true for any other platform that does this the right way. You're going to have to actually have an 8x8 or other cloud admin, and you're going to have a Microsoft admin to hook them together. And that's the step that will have to occur. You're going to have to get somebody on your side who owns your Microsoft implementation. So that's it. Just need to synchronize these things. Just need to do that one-time work, and it should work from there. It's not that hard. So let's wrap this up. We went through why you cared. We saw that everybody's using Office 365. Probably you are if you're on this call in the first place. Why else would you be listening to me here talk? We've discovered the various different options, and we've looked at what we considered our recommended option. You've seen the benefits that you can get out of it, and we've hit a couple of key points that you need to know. So let's sum up with the things that you walk away from here to remember. Teams holds a big part of your communications, but it doesn't hold your voice. It doesn't have it, so they're divided for reporting purposes. And you want to start to bring them together so you can have a common view. People can work in one interface in a lot of cases. You can do better reporting. All of those things are good things to accomplish. You have three major options. You can connect to your legacy PBX. We generally don't recommend that. There may be a good reason that our solution team will tell you to do that, but it's unlikely. This is not really our recommended solution. Your second solution is to use Microsoft. That can work if you're not really focused on voice, if it's not really important to you. But Microsoft has a lot of problems that we went over, and I wouldn't recommend that. And I would use a cloud solution, but you've got to look for one that's simple with seamless integration. As you can tell, we've recommended a lot 8x8. That's even the meeting platform we're on today. That's not necessarily the only solution that works this way, but it has very good, and there's a lot of reasons we recommend it for a lot of other reasons besides just this. But what we'll do is we'll sit down with you. If you're still trying to figure out what platform you want to be on, we'll sit down and figure out what the best answer is for you and make a recommendation. And then the other thing, you've got to remember, hey, you've always got to get a Microsoft phone system license. No matter what, no matter which option, no matter what, got to get that Microsoft phone system license. Understand that, roll that into your cost accounting, understand that cost is going to be there. Still confused by all this? If there's something that we can help with, you can contact us. If you've already got a vertical account manager you're working with, certainly talk with them. If you don't, you can talk to us at vmarketing@vertical.com. Happy to be able to help you out. We'll make all of this simple. We'll help you find the phone system license. We'll do all the setup for you, and it will just be as easy as getting that phone system license, getting Teams licenses for whatever platform, and you're off to the races. So let's look at some questions here. I would say very deliberately save some time because I expect there'll be some decent questions here again. So the first question is, how is 911 handled, from Greg Pittman? That's a great question. So with 911, you're going to have to manage the 911 registry. And in, for example, the 8x8 example, you would do that on the 8x8 side. Now, with any dynamic device, if you're talking about the mobile device, or you're talking about a desktop client on a laptop that can move, there's going to be some limitations there. But all the 911 handling is done on the cloud telephony side. And the only way that would be Microsoft is if it is using the Microsoft calling plan. And even Microsoft at that time is limited to say, hey, look, there's cases where we don't know how to do this. So the next question we've got is, whatever level of programming to make this turnkey, will Vertical do it? Yeah, absolutely. We'll take care of it. The only thing we need to do, like I said a moment ago, is we've got to be able to have Microsoft admin rights to your Microsoft setup. And that's absolutely required or critical. We've got to have access into your Office 365. That can be you logging on to a screen share session with us, entering credentials, us working collaboratively with somebody who does your outsourced IT, whatever it is, but we'll make sure that's taken care of, and we'll provide the step-by-step and so that you understand what has to be done on the Office side as well as what's done on the 8x8 side, for example. The next question is, with 8x8, what about cost? So basically with 8x8, you're buying an 8x8 seat, and that depends on feature set and capabilities. I'm not going to get into a full-blown, oh, here's all the product levels. But, it's starting out pretty much comparable to where 8x8, where Microsoft has their domestic calling plan, and goes up if you want to add contact center and SMS and some other powerful features like that. You can, spend 20 or 40, even $100 for a high-end contact center license. So you'll buy that seat. And then the other piece, Hamid, that you'll want to buy is the phone system license on the Microsoft side and a Teams license on the 8x8 side, which is about $5. So if you've already got 8x8 and you're on this call, you just would be $5 per user is basically what you're looking for. But if you're looking at, hey, I want to convert everything over, it's anywhere depending upon what feature set and what you're looking at, somewhere between $10 and $30 a seat for the 8x8 full experience. The next question is there any consideration of your Microsoft license depending upon what level that you have? Oh, that's a great question, and one that I probably should have done a separate slide about. So Office comes in different levels. We saw this earlier. Everything here on this list, except for Enterprise 5, works the same way. They all require you to get the Microsoft phone system license. And if you wanted to buy Microsoft for everything, you'd buy the calling plan as well. So Enterprise 5 comes with the phone system license. It's the one and only one that does. So if you happen to have that, hey, it's already built in, and you one person who doesn't have to think about it. But those are pretty rare out there on the ground, as the Enterprise 5 licenses. What else do we have here? So there's a couple of questions about Mitel MyCollab and which pieces and parts. And so that's a little more complex discussion. What I'm going to suggest is, if you're working with us already, your account manager can set up a meeting with one of our solution engineers to look at your specific setup. You're asking about software versions and all that. I get that. We can tell you what's necessary and what's going to have to be there. What I can tell you is there's going to be some additional software that you'll get, which will be the link. You'll still have to get the phone system license, and you will need to make sure that your MyCollab is up to date with the right version of everything. But that's something we can do on a case-by-case basis. I'm not going to get into, because there's a lot of variations there about the pieces and parts of it. And we can certainly help you with that. Just contact your account manager and we can get that answer for you. It's a great question, though. We want to make sure and give you the attention you deserve. So a lot of great questions here. Do we have anything else that anything is looking for? Any other questions that we're trying to find? Give everybody just a minute longer. There's a lot of people here. Somebody may remember, you can use the chat button in the lower left-hand corner. Just got a mouse over the lower half corner. You'll see it. You can click on it and type in a question. And if you think of things later on, once again, you can just email us, talk to your account manager if you already have an account manager with Vertical, or you're already working with one of our sales executives as you're looking at moving this direction. You can talk with them directly, and they can get the solution engineer that you need for this, or you can just email us at vmarketing@vertical.com. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. I really appreciate you all's time. I hope this has been helpful and useful. If there's more detail you want to dive in, for example, Manny, we really want to get in and see how your specific system works, we'll get you set up with a solution engineer to go into your specific needs. And that echoes for everybody on here. If you want somebody to sit down and talk with you, we're happy to do it. That's what we're here for. Everybody have a good day, and I hope it all goes well for you.